While a sphere will always cast a perfectly circular shaped shadow, regardless of the angle of the light which the spherical object is transiting or obscuring. So spherical objects will always cast spherical shadows. However, never can anyone demonstrate in reality the shadow coming from a sphere to diminish in size with distance from the object. The only time this sort of thing occurs is hypothetically in the heliocentric theory, because such converging conical shadows are necessary in order for the heliocentric model to work. Um, so, with that being said, it is thus assumed by liance or theoretical astrophysics that such conical shaped shadows must be occurring because they adhere to the asinine hypothetical theory verse regardless of the evidence presented to them. Now, while the moon appears to be rather large in the sky, representing about a half a degree of the apparent celestial sphere, this is obviously caused by severe atmospheric lensing or magnification of the light of the moon coming through the atmosphere and being magnified. I know this sounds pretty far out at first, but when you actually study how the light source of distant celestial objects behave, it becomes very obvious that the atmosphere acts exactly like a giant subjective convex lens surrounding every observer. So, while the moon appears to be rather large in the sky, this could all very well be caused by just very strong, severe atmospheric lensing or magnification of the moon. And sticking with the law of demonstrable physics related to light and shadows, if the moon is indeed transiting the sun to cause solar eclipses, then the moon cannot possibly be larger than 2 miles in diameter. Now, I'm not necessarily making this claim, but again, strictly adhering to demonstrable attributes of light and shadow, it's possible for an object to cast a shadow far larger than its actual angular size, and can only produce a shadow as small as its actual angular size. So, with that law of light and shadows in mind, unless there are some unknown variables involved, which we'll get into in the heliocentric theory model, the moon couldn't possibly be larger than about 2 miles in diameter, according to the shadow cast by those three eclipses, at least historically documented eclipses, where the shadow of the moon was about 2 miles in diameter or less. Well, the fact that three annular eclipses mentioned earlier cast a 2 mile diameter shadow shows that at least one time, and actually three times, this gives us some very interesting data about the moon and its possible actual size. Now, if we know the moon's actual size, then that can actually help us triangulate on it while ignoring the magnification of it through the lens of the atmosphere. So, if the moon is hypothetically only 2 miles in diameter, and I know this sounds pretty far out, and is quite distant, as we presume that the moon is quite distant, then the apparent angular size of the moon, according to an observer on Earth, must necessarily be dramatically increased by way of atmospheric lensing or magnification, which makes total sense since we know the Earth is flat and stationary, and simple perspective, doesn't really solve this rising and setting of the celestial objects. However, when you add atmospheric lensing and refraction into the mix of perspective of these allegedly high up sources of light, then it actually makes perfect sense.